Hello, everyone, and welcome to this conversation about heritage and healing experiences and global competencies. My name is Andres Lanza, and I am the Educational Products Coordinator of the Global Up programs at AFS International. And today I am joined by Phyllis Jeffers-Coly, who founded with her husband, Diasporic Soul, an organization that offers heritage and healing experiences for Black people and offering them opportunities to engage in cultural and contemplative practices. I'm gonna let you, Phyllis, explain that in your own words in a bit. I would just like to introduce you because from what I understood, you split your time between North Carolina in the United States and Senegal in West Africa, which is where the travel experiences take place. And I also know that you have more than 20 years of experience in higher education, including designing and facilitating leadership development workshops and programs, especially for youth workers, community organizers, immigrant women, daycare workers, college-age adults, and high school students. And yeah, it makes so much sense when I speak about that, because you are also a facilitator of the Global Up programs and you use it yourself with your organization. So how are you first? And please introduce yourself. Let me know.
I'm great. I'm great. I'm in Senegal for what promises to be a fuller summer in compared to what we've had for the last 2 summers in terms of being able to host people again. Not huge groups, not students this time, but practitioners and educators. So that is exciting to have that scheduled for later in the summer. So I'm great, anticipating all of that, among other things that I guess we'll talk about.
Oh yeah, for sure. I have one important question to start.
Yeah.
You define yourself as a diasporic soul. So that's the first question that I want to address. What is a diasporic soul to you? How would you define it?
So I named the business, I named us. I always, as you said, I've done leadership development really since I was a student leader in undergrad, and realized that people don't always develop young people with intentionality in terms of their student activism, organizing, and leadership practice on and off campus. So ever since the end of my tenure, I was like, okay, people need training and development to do this well, and to do it in a way that's a word I wouldn't have used back then, but one that I will use now, where they have balance and are not burnt out and overwhelmed throughout the process or by the end of the process, whatever their tenure looks like. Mm-hmm. So for me, Diasporic Soul really initially was and I was born in 1971. I'm a hip hop head. So for me, it's a moniker for Blackness. Like it's a yes, like back in the day when you wear your headphones, like a yes, y'all. It's like following the drinking board. It's like finding a quilt on the Underground Railroad. It's a yes, y'all to Black folks, primarily from the US, but not exclusively. That's how it started. And then as I read more and spent more time with it conceptually, I came across a piece by a woman named Dr. Sharon Harrell. She's a faculty member at Pepperdine, and she's written about soul as a transformative healing resource that reflects the cultural sensibilities of the African diaspora. That's like the definition of soul, according to Sharon Harrell. And I fleshed that out in the way that we do the work. And the diaspora, of course, speaks to the diaspora of your francophone, or the diaspora of your anglophone of Africa. So Black folks who have roots on the continent of Africa, in the US, in the Caribbean, all over the world, really. Fundamentally, all human beings are from Africa, right? Like we all know about Lucy in Tanzania and East Africa and the bones and archaeologists and all that. But specifically, we're talking about, even more specifically, Eddy and I, my husband and I, are talking about Black folks in America, in the United States, who can trace their roots back to those enslaved Africans. And we serve them with our heritage and healing experience.
Wonderful.
That was a lot, but you can see I love it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I read a really cool definition of your work and what it means to you in your in an article that was recently published when Grandma Comes to Visit. It was published in the Journal of Contemplative Inquiries, the special edition, like featuring the wisdom and insights of Black contemplatives. And let me read something that I really liked that you wrote, so I'm quoting it. By healing, we mean, evoking Alice Walker, putting the energy, heart, and courage back into our bodies with our own culture, soul, so that we continue to transform and dismantle the institutions and relationships that have been causing us harm, injury, misery, and trauma. Put another way, it means remembering and revealing in the fact that we are most certainly Black, dope, and all good. And as singer Seynabo Say reminds us in her song Breathe, we are beautiful, magical, and valuable. I just wanted to quote that because I think it's wonderful the way you describe it and the way you connected with the word soul and contemplative experiences as well, because it seems that it goes beyond what Western a Western mindset can comprehend, right? How would you say that, especially in Senegal, people define the word or the concept of a soul?
Well, let me go back, because I think what's important is one person that isn't named specifically in that quote, but sort of we bump up against. And when Walker says energy and Senegal says magic, it's this gentleman, Maladoma Somé, who passed away last year, who was a practitioner from Burkina Faso, who ultimately lived in my home state of North Carolina. Is this idea that you can't heal without spirit, ritual, and community. So here it's very in the article, in that longer article piece that you quote from, I speak to this idea of connecting to spirit. So although initially my concept or what I'm naming as soul sort of has this hip hop flavor and is about identity, cultural identity, political identity, as in what it means ostensibly. Although we're not a monolith, I always want to have that as a asterisk. We're not a monolith. We're not homogenous. We're not all the same. But there is there's some cultural milieux. There's some cultural consistency. So this idea of soul here in Senegal, what you get to see here very explicitly is something that you see all over the diaspora. There's this spiritual piece that often in the Western world gets truncated, marginalized, demonized, criticized, and erased. So when you even when you look at non-African informed or African centered perspectives, once you start to shift and you shift outside of sort of an Occidental or European mindset, you get to bring the whole body back into the conversation. So when we talk about soul, there is the unseen, the spiritual realm. And you know, we're not talking about in some sort of religious way, like, am I going to hell or am I going to heaven? But just that we exist and we're connected to something that we can't see. And in the African diaspora, that includes both the spiritual and divine nature of nature and the spiritual and divine nature of those that have gone to the other side. So there's a lot of reverence here and acknowledgement of ancestors as well, which I kind of touch on in the article. So that's not a decisive answer about how is soul defined in Senegal. I think part of what I want to try to get across is part of the healing and heritage piece for us, for many people who were colonized and conquered, and that ain't just Black people, right? Is we were taught that our bodies, we were not human because we did not have a soul. So the argument was we were not human because we did not have a soul. And clearly we have, if you need that narrative, clearly we are human, clearly we do have a soul. But in this case, we're also thinking about soul as this connection with something divine, something spiritual, something we can't always see. And that's always been here, long before the Christians or the Muslims showed up.
Mhm.
That's a lot, but that's what it is.
That's a lot. Yeah. It reminds me of something that one of my favorite musicians says. He's a rapper, he's Brazilian, and he's Black.
Mhm.
And he tells a story about a time in which he went to visit his ancestors in Angola. And he visited a church in which Black people in the past were not allowed to go because there was this mistaken idea from Christianity that said that Black people didn't have a soul. And there's something beautiful that he says, that as an artist, that every time he goes on the stage and performs, he decided to accomplish the mission of bringing back the soul of his sisters and brothers that they once thought that they didn't have and they didn't deserve to have. And it's so powerful, and it's so great to hear that
beautiful.
from you.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength, he and I.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's kind of contradictory to try to define soul, because we're precisely talking about something that goes beyond that, right? It's really hard to put into words what it is, and that's why I wanted to ask you about the experience itself of what you do and what the people you work with go through. Could you explain to me how is it to participate and take part in these programs, how the program works? What is it like for someone to take part in it? What do they say? And why is that work so important for them?
Okay, so we have sort of two categories of folks that we work with. So I'll spend more time talking more about students who are here for a longer amount of time and actually work with us for an extended amount of time, because I think that's the most applicable in terms of our relationship with AFS and the Global Up, or what's now known as Global Up, what we knew as the Global Competency Certification, right? So we do shorter experiences for what we call family, friends, and kinfolk. So for example, a young lady at 13 comes with her mom, and she has her coming of age or her Black mitzvah for 7 to 9 days. Or a retreat where we have women here from the Southeast region of the United States for 6 days. So there's overlap in the itinerary for everyone. For students, it's optimal to have them here for 2 weeks. You know, they may be here for physically in country in Senegal for about 12, 13 days. And then there's, of course, a travel day in and a travel day out. For those folks and those are the folks we used the GCC with or Global Up with in the past, we do a preliminary gathering, convening / orientation face-to-face, and we introduce folks to two things. We introduce them initially to culture, specifically modern day Senegal. You know, what's the population look like? What's the language? What can you expect without revealing too much? And then we also introduce them to contemplative practices. And as you mentioned, the article is in the Journal of Contemplative Inquiry, which is the publication of the Center for the Contemplative Mind and Society, what we call C-Mind. I'm a C-Minder and a Diasporic Soul. So as a certified yoga instructor, one of those primary contemplative practices is yoga. And of course, there's the physical asana practice. We primarily introduce those students on their first time with us in the United States. So we do the first convening in the US face-to-face at a mix on campus and ideally in a yoga studio. So for example, the students from Xavier University, we partner with the place that I did my first yoga certification. We did restorative yoga, and we specifically do restorative yoga for race-based stress and trauma. And that's informed by the work of Dr. Gail Parker. And there's a thread of her thinking and her insights and her wisdom throughout the work that we do. And of course, we introduce them to the other practices that are documented and articulated by Sea Mind in their tree of contemplative practices. I'm looking at the tree right now to ground myself. So we begin to get those students, those folks connected to their body and their breath as a primary contemplative practice. You know, when we talk about race-based stress and trauma, we talk about any kind of stress or trauma, we stop breathing, we hold our breath is shallow, etc. So the yoga practice, the restorative yoga practice allows us to settle our nervous system. So part of what we're trying to do is settle the nervous system. So, and that's an hour. I don't want to go any further than that. So we introduce folks to contemplative practice, restorative yoga as a primary practice, journaling, reflective journaling as a primary practice. And then I mentioned ritual and spirit before when I mentioned Some, and we talk about Walker. So initially when folks come here, they're introduced to traditional rituals, which is also considered a contemplative practice, but it's also connecting us to a culture that we were ripped away from, I'll say, or disconnected from when we were put on boats and enslaved. And then as your Brazilian hip hop artist speaks to, as do many folks in the diaspora speak to, there's these spiritual practices that we were told were dirty or wrong or satanic or demonic. So, I mean, we do introduce people to those practices as a part of their restoration and healing experience. Like that's, and we don't go to Glory Island. We don't go to the Maison de Enslavement. We don't go to the slave house. We don't go to the slave trading post first. That's like day 4 or 5. Our goal is to introduce folks to who we were. It's like Burna Boy says, before we were anything else, we were African. So we try to help them see what that might look like, knowing that Senegal is not Nigeria and Senegal is not Cote d'Ivoire, it's not Burkina Faso, but there are overlapping, there's soul that's present in all the places, and there's similar practices and a similar commitment to community. So we connect them to community. We eat communally. They meet my mother-in-law, they sit with her. All of those things happen while they're here. So we take them to specific sites, as I mentioned, Glory Island, the Museum of Black Civilizations, the the African Renaissance Monument. Let me be specific. It's not a Senegalese monument. It's supposed to be for the whole diaspora. We do a lot in nature. The rituals, of course, because nature is divine. Rituals are the ocean, water, elements of nature are all part of the ritual practices that we engage in. So we spend a lot of time in nature. We practice yoga at night on a rooftop. We enjoy the food. We do dance and drumming as a way to discharge, which is a whole nother thing that Resma Minicam talks about in his work, Grandma's Hands. So yeah, all of that, we do all of that in 14 days. And we do a lot of conversation, a lot of reflection. We do some contemplative art as well as a part of the process.
Wonderful.
I could go on and on, but I won't. That's enough.
But I want to hear more. I remember when we first talked, you said something that was so interesting for me. You mentioned that some of your participants said once that before starting the program, as a reason for them to participate is that they didn't feel American enough in the US, and they didn't feel, or that there was one of the possibilities not to feel African enough or Senegalese enough in Senegal or in other African countries. So that's when intercultural learning and intercultural competence comes in. And that's what I wanted to ask. How do you make the Global Up program work? Like, how do you complement it with such an already complex experience?
Well, self-awareness is the primary tenet that I'm drawn to in Global Up, or the GCC, the Global Competency resource that's available through you all. And it is the strand. So if we're looking at leadership development practices in higher ed for students, the dominant model is the 7 C's, and the first C is consciousness of self, or self-awareness. So part of that for us is what is it that you are feeling, which takes us back to the body, takes us back to the breath. So there's a somatic approach or an embodied approach. How does it feel to be here in Senegal, in the body that you're in? Like, what are the sensations that you feel? And then subsequently, what are the emotions that you feel? Also, before we bring people here, what is it that you are experiencing there? So this not feeling American or not feeling, so what race-based stress and trauma does is it disrupts us in yoga, what we call the Manipur or the root chakra. And that's where we feel, for those of you who got the triangles and the grids and stuff, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's safety, security, and sense of belonging. So what Black people feel in the United States, including after 10 people die in a grocery store in the hood, is they don't feel safe, they don't feel secure, and damn, they don't feel like they belong. So part of what we try to get back to is this sense of safety. Some of that is an embodied experience on the yoga mat. Some of that is, what is it that I see around me? So there's this young lady, if you go to our Instagram, I don't know if we call it a page, you go to our Instagram feed and you look at the videos, there's a young lady named Samaya, and Samaya is from Richmond. She's always been in a predominantly Black space. Like she comes from a place that economically and socially and culturally, just like Buffalo, New York. It's the exact same place, except it's in Richmond, Virginia. So it's a little bit Southern. But she comes out of that predominantly Black space not thinking she's beautiful. And she comes here and what she describes in that video is like, I came here and I saw women that look like me, feeling prideful, etc. So there is this idea of, I gotta go to this space where not only it's all Black, but where Black is validated and celebrated and not diminished. And remember that these young people are coming to us, as are other folks. I mean, it's, we're talking pre-pandemic at this point. They're coming the summer before George Floyd, but after Michael Brown, after Philippe Castillo in Minneapolis. They're coming after a racial incidents at their institution that are very, very, very close to them. And so they're all disoriented. And they're also, one of the conversations that's being had in higher ed is, we're broken, like higher ed needs healing. So CMON has just done a series on healing in higher ed. And part of what we're struggling with is, what is success and how do we define it? Because one of the ways that race-based stress and trauma plays out is this idea of high effort coping, or what we call John Henryism. John Henry was a folk hero, a Black folk hero who basically just worked himself to death. So coming here allows me to go back, like Samaya says, with this really strong sense of, okay, Black people have done this and this and this and this and this. And it's not to come back and not want to deal with white folks or not want to be in diverse spaces. It's wanting to be more confident in my own skin, in my own body, in a way that I have never felt before, or that has been disrupted because of things like what happened in Charlottesville in 2017, or what happened in the summer of 2020, or what just happened last Saturday in Buffalo. All that gets, and we also have this intergenerational trauma too. So there's some healing that can happen, not only for the individual person that comes here, but there's opportunities for healing for the extended family or community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did for sure. Yeah, I just want to hear from you. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly that. How is it for you? Because for a lot of people, for people who are listening to this conversation, can it can be very distant from their realities, and for others,
Mhm.
very close to their realities. And that's why it's so important to hear that from you and how you are experiencing it, especially as an educator, as a facilitator,
Mhm.
as someone who guides these experiences um, that connect elements from the real life, something that you can see on the news, that you can see on the TV that has an impact on your life, um, and also with something much more complex that is, trauma and healing.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's important for people to understand why that matters and why that is closer to our reality that what we think. I am here in the US, and I know that these kind of stories have a much bigger impact on people. I come from Bolivia, which is much farther, and in which these news are also very impactful, but they are experienced in a
Mhm.
very different way. So yeah, I wanted to bring up
Can
something
I
that you.
add something, Andreas?
Yeah, please.
Because you asked about sort of the intercultural competency or
Mm-hmm.
cross-cultural competency. So for someone like myself or the students that I serve who have never really experienced anyone else from another culture, um, and specifically from another Black culture, it's
Mm-hmm.
important to see the diversity of what Black is and what Black ain't, to evoke a old documentary called Black is Black Ain't. Because again, we get part of the trauma or part of white supremacy, part of epistemic violence is our narratives about how expansive or how diverse Black gets to be. So when you come to a place like Senegal, and we're constantly going back to this idea of soul. And what are the elements of soul? Well, we're communal, we're creative, we improvise, um, we respect our elders and our ancestors. So we get to see that sort of play out. And there's some part of that that allows us to say, oh, well, there are Black people who are different from me. I can learn from them
Mm-hmm.
about who they are, and I can respect them for who they are. We can coexist and create something else. But also, the tie back to Africa is critical. Like the primary contemplative practice to come here, whether you go to Senegal or Ghana, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, is, and we're consistently naming West Africa for reasons that I think are obvious to people, I
Mm-hmm.
hope. I can come back and see myself differently and understand culture and identity through a different lens. So I can see, for example, Black people play in all my life. We play this thing called the dozens. We talk, excuse my French, we talk junk to each other. We tease each other. It's a thing. It's like basketball. It's like football. It's like you get involved in this, you could be on the block for like an hour going back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And I come here and I'm in the kitchen, and that's usually in the US, it's quite a male domain. It's a very male domain. Women usually don't engage in it. We do. I will if I have to. But I associate it with men. But here I see it between ethnic groups. They tease each other. So they're playing the dozens. So I can go home to the US understanding that something that I associate with myself in the US is actually something that has been carried over across the ocean. I mean, and there's tons of examples of that. And that too is kind of healing and restorative, in its own way. And the awareness is just see, and some of it, I don't want to make like this is easy. I do want to be clear. This is hard work. Like the young people from Xavier were really uncomfortable. They were really uncomfortable. They were uncomfortable over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And so are the adult learners that come to us under the context of a retreat or a family, friends, and kinfolk experience. It's challenging to be outside of your own culture. And part of the self-awareness is, when are you just being a spoiled ass American? Irregardless of being Black or white or Latino or however you self-identify, like, you can't always have it your way. This is not McDonald's. Or is that Burger King? You know what I'm saying?
I do.
You can't always have it all your way.
For sure not.
You can't have a Whopper today. No Whoppers.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm so curious about the experience for you as a facilitator, because you said it's hard work. It's really hard for both sides. It's hard for them to take the courage to embark on that experience. It takes courage from you to do it again and again with different groups of people and relive that, right? For sure. So I wanted to ask you, how's that experience for you and for them when also they add the intercultural global competencies component to your program?
For me, what's important, and I would do this as a facilitator anyway. So we have these requirements for the certification, for the completion of the program to receive the certificate, is you have to have these conversations. So you have to have these facilitated dialogues as a part of the experience, some of which can be before they leave the country, which for us is the case. But as a longtime leadership development practitioner, that's basically a foregone conclusion, and the GCC or the Global Up gives me a framework to tuck that facilitated dialogue in. And then the contemplative practices, as they're named, i.e. deep listening, storytelling, counsel, circle, dialogue, bearing witness. I mean, I can play with, I majored in literature twice, 3 times, 2.5 times. So I can weave the language of the GCC in what I know about leadership development practice, facilitation, and what I know about contemplative practices. And as someone who's done her advanced yoga teacher training, I can integrate the yoga practice into that. Not necessarily a physical practice of downward facing dog or child's pose, but conceptually, one of the key components of yoga is Svatjaya, which is self-study. So it's this ongoing, recurring piece. What I also like about the framework or the anchor of the Global Up, or what I know as the GCC pre-pandemic, right?
Yes.
Is I can engage folks around, because I've had a long time interest in digital badging and micro-credentialing and acknowledging what young people know, not just young people, but young people in particular, but not exclusively, what they know, what they can do, and what their dispositions are. I like the GCC because it lets me require submission of artifacts after the fact. So, for example, the students from Xavier did shields. The second cohort from Xavier did shields. So I needed to see those shields completed before they would get to GCC. So it allows me to continue to engage them after they leave Senegal, and allows me to engage them before. And it allows me also, what's important is no facilitator can do this work without saying, okay, here are the rules of engagement. Here's our ways of being. So the GCC also helps me establish expectations. And it also allows me to set up shared vocabulary in addition to the concepts that I'm introducing from my own thinking and the thinking of people like Parker, Minicam, Somé, Harold. I can integrate your language terms with those terms. So people were all talking the same language, which is not necessarily language they've heard before, most of them.
Absolutely. Would you say that then you were able to take advantage of that flexibility to add your own content to it and adapt it to this particular context?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. It was easy to do. And I actually, we started a residency program informally just to kind of see what that feels like. So also we allowed our first resident, she was with us for 9 months because of COVID. It was supposed to be 3 months. So because of her time here with us, we also offered her the opportunity to complete the Global Up certification as well. Because again, she's been in country, she's done the work, we've journaled, we've had these facilitated dialogues, often informally, not as structured as what we would have had with the students that came as a group before her. But in that 9-month process, she sat with myself, she sat with Eddy, she sat with our mom, she's been in community. So she can be reflective in the places in which the modules are asking her to be reflective. So yeah, it's been great. And I intend to use it. I have practitioners coming, higher ed practitioners, administrators coming this summer. And so I'll be integrating it into their experience as well as part of their preparation for being here.
Yeah, that's great. Well, since you're talking about plans for this summer, for example, I'm sure that there's people listening to us right now that might be interested in taking part of this, might identify or feel that this is something for them. How can they reach out to you? What are the plans for this year? How does it work?
Okay. So our registration for our summer experience is closed. We have a 9-day experience from June 27th to July 7th for practitioners. We will be coming to the United States in the fall. I have a book that's just been published. It's called We Got Soul, We Can Heal. So we'll be available to do retreats for folks if they want to do heritage and healing retreats for Black staff, faculty, and or students, or in community settings. So if folks are interested in setting up a retreat experience in the United States, or setting up a visit or an experience for students, faculty, or staff here in Senegal, they can fill out the contact forms on our website, which is diasporicsoul.com. They can also DM me at Instagram. It's Arabas, diasporicsoul.com. I'm just like saying Arabas. And my email is it's the literary stuff. Madam Coley at diasporicsoul.com. So any of those ways you can reach out to me.
It's wonderful.
Great.
We will add that to the description of this video that everyone is watching. We're going to mention the articles that we talked about. There are some others, the blog that you have as well, that's super interesting. And I would just like to have another conversation, maybe a podcast of 3 hours, because this is so wonderful to hear. I love this. I love this conversation. But I would just like let you know that how much we admire you at AFS, how proud we are to partner with Diasporic Soul with you, and how much we admire what you and your husband do. And I'm so grateful for this conversation. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you. Will you send me the name of the Brazilian rapper, please, and that specific track that you referred to?
Absolutely.
Connected to his ancestors. That's exciting to me.
For sure. He's one of the people I admire the most. I've never met him, of course. He's super famous. His name is Emicida. Yeah,
Emicida,
it's
okay.
Emicida. I'll share it with you later after
Okay.
this call, but whoever that is listening, listen to Emicida as well. Listen
And
to
Burner Boy.
Yes, exactly. Burner Boy.
Burner Boy. You see some
Wonderful.
overlap.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much to you, Phyllis. Thank
Thank
you
you.
to everyone who is listening to us. And please reach out to us, reach out to Phyllis, and have a look at the wonderful job that she does.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.